Look at that. It's a beautiful day outside. The sun is out and shining. It's a wonderful day to be outside. And you're just sitting in here playing video games.
What do you want me to do?
Video games. They've become a really big part of our society now. Where once they were just simple games like Pong and Tetris, they've become really intricately designed games like Halo, Far Cry, and Left 4 Dead. These games have drastically changed from the 8 and 16-bit cartridges that we used to know. Now they come with enhanced CDs that hold all sorts of detail that we would have never thought imaginable back in the 70s and 80s. Our video games have come a long way due to our technological advancements. I mean, just look at this NES Batman game, for instance. Now, don't get me wrong. The look of a game isn't the most important feature of it, but the look of a game has become more important since our games are now lifelike. Now take a look at this modern Batman game. The modern day game has technology to make the art come to life, and to let the player experience Batman in a revolutionary way. I mean, well, come on. Batman's just grappling through the city onto helicopters, beating up a couple of guys. It's awesome. Unfortunately, video games have been attacked throughout the years as the root of the violence and crime in our society today. Politics and the news media constantly blame any violence and crimes on some of the graphic content in video games since most of the world plays video games nowadays. We'll never fear,
for the great and powerful Seth Whipple is here to guide you.
And with the help of some friends, hopefully I can convince you that video games do not cause violence. Now let's take a little history tour of video games.
Video games were first conceived back in 1947. Thomas T. Goldsmith Jr. and S.O. Ray Mann filed a United States patent request for a machine they called the cathode ray tube amusement device. The game simulated firing at airborne targets using knobs and buttons. This is the only known schematic for the game, and the game has not been recreated to this day. The next popular game was called Tennis for Two, which was created in 1958 by William Higginbotham. Will used an oscilloscope and an analog computer to make the game, which was played with two box-shaped controllers, both equipped with a knob for trajectory and a button for hitting the ball. Video games had a golden era in the 70s and 80s when arcade games like Space Invaders, Galaxian, and Asteroids were released. In the 70s and 80s, the video games for home consoles were on cartridges that were durable and handled all the information for the game. In the 90s, video games evolved into 3D games such as Star Fox 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and Conker's Bad Fur Day, which brought about a revolutionary perspective to the world of gaming. In the early 2000s, after the big internet boom in the late 90s, video games such as Halo and Call of Duty went to online play, which allowed players to play together or compete against each other from all over the world in a safe environment.
I am very lost. Just lost. That looks like a thing from Star Wars. Oh, it is a person.
Since 2006, with the release of the Nintendo Wii, gaming has moved to more motion-controlled gaming, where the player has to use either a motion-sensing controller like the Nintendo Wii Remote, or the Sony PlayStation's Move, or even Microsoft's Kinect, which is a webcam motion-sensing device.
Now that we know a little history, let's move on to some of the research that professionals have done.
Jody Dale and Karen Dale wrote in their paper about a theory about the connection to violent video games and violence. This theory says that the exposure to television and movie violence increases aggressive behavior because increased exposure to media violence may decrease a person's ability to not engage in violent behavior. This theory also explains that weakening inhibitions may work through changing an individual's perception of what is normal or acceptable behavior, and that increased exposure to violence on the video game screen should theoretically produce similar increases in aggressive behavior because the same conceptual variables are involved.
Susie Kim did research about the theory as well. Kim researched about a man named Chris Ferguson, a professor at Texas A&M International. According to Kim's research, Ferguson believes that the research for the connection between video games and violence conducted over the past 20 years has been quite inconsistent. Ferguson explained that while there are studies that find violent video games do increase a desire for aggressive behavior, the studies have been notoriously hard to replicate, and they haven't been able to find links between aggression in the lab and violence or crimes in real life. Ferguson also points out that video games have become more popular and more violent while youth violence has declined.
Kim discovered that in a 2012 article for the Journal of Psychiatric Research, Ferguson and his co-authors examined 165 participants over 3 years and found that playing violent video games was not linked to youth aggression or dating violence. Instead, they found that depression, antisocial personality traits, exposure to family violence, and peer influences were the best predictors of aggression-related outcomes.
But wouldn't it be nice if we can keep our kids away from these violent video games so that they don't end up like this?
Well, thankfully, there is. It's called the ESRB.
The ESRB stands for Entertainment Software Rating Board. The ESRB is a non-profit, self-regulatory body that assigns ratings for video games and apps so parents can make informed choices. The ESRB was created mainly due to games like Mortal Kombat, where parents were buying the game for their children, not aware that it was a bloody and gory game. For our last little bit, everybody's going to give their spiel as to whether or not they believe video games cause violence. So, we're going to start over here with Cody. Do you believe video games cause violence or not?
No, I don't believe it.
Alright, and why do you believe that?
Well, I believe that because it's not generally the game, it's generally the people that you interact with that cause the violence. Any video game can cause irritation if you play with multiple people that become basically trolls, in a way.
Alright. And Aisha, do you believe video games cause violence?
No.
Okay, and why do you believe that?
Okay, somewhat relating to his point, it's not always the people that you play with that do it. Sometimes people just get irritated with the game, but it's actually just the people themselves.
Alrighty. Dan, what do you think? Video games cause violence, yes or no?
No. Because it depends on the person, too. If they're not in the right mindset, then shit could happen. Like if you're drunk or you're totally out there, you learn from that and then they'll just go do it. But you have to be a regular straight person basically. If that makes sense.
Alrighty, and Noah, what do you think? Video games cause violence, yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Alrighty, and why do you think that?
It's kind of like, if you combine all of the ideas that have been bounced about this room in the last 2 minutes, I believe that humans as a whole are aggressive on a base level. Like, just because I'm going to do some really horrible things to as many people as possible, as fast as possible, for a high score in a game that I happen to be playing, doesn't mean I'm going to run outside and do the same kind of horrible things. Some people might, but it really comes down to a person's mental state of being. Though there are a lot of situations when I'm playing video games, particularly with some people, where, you just want to reach across and deck them as hard as you can in the arm.
Well, I guess it's my turn to give myself a little bit of a opinion voice in this. And to be honest, after all the research and all the hard work that I put into what I could with this video, I've changed my opinion a couple of times. At first, I was completely for video games. I couldn't imagine the thought that they caused violence. And then, after I got through researching it, I was more over on, yeah, it really seems like it could cause violence. And then, after balancing all of the research, I came to the conclusion that it really is on the fence of the subject for me. And really what it depends on is the type of person that's playing the video game. Now, I'll explain myself. There is a certain point where every person has to hold themselves back from inhibition. And I totally agree with the theory that being around all the violence from the media and from video games probably isn't the best idea. But that doesn't mean that you can't indulge it. I mean, that's like chocolate. Sure, if you eat a lot of chocolate, you're probably going to get fat. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get fat. It's a very poor analogy, but it's the best that I can muster up. So for me, it would be yes and no, but it depends on the psyche of the person. Thank you for watching this. We may do it again later sometime, but if not, this was really fun to do. And does anyone else have anything else they wanted to add?
Do the Harlem Shake.